Clearly, Ukraine has been vocal about the need for more Patriot systems. If it gets it, would Ukraine be able to win this war outright?
Can I say hold that thought for a minute? So I think Anne-Marie's right that there are a limited number of Patriot interceptors, but the big discussion is two things. So there is a finite number of these things, but if the U.S. were willing to give its licensing permission to Ukraine, that would be a game changer. That would be an absolute game changer. There's something else the U.S. can do as well. So if you go to the factory where these PAC-3s are made, it's in Camden, Arkansas. They're not on a 24-hour schedule. I think that's incredible. We're more than 4.5 years into the war. Come on. President Trump can make a phone call and fix this today.
Wow. So there could be ways of expanding the defense industrial base right now, overnight, with a phone call, to your point. Shy of the hardware, we've seen a remarkable advance, bold moves by Ukraine, striking deeper into Russia, and they've been answered by very heavy ballistic missile attacks on civilian areas in Kyiv. But what has been the change in mindset to be able to see Ukraine reach so deeply into Russia and actually begin a conversation about whether it can win this war? It's a very different place than we were in a year or two ago. How much is that affecting the feeling and hopes on the ground?
Joe, it is a massive change. I was in Kiev in December, and it was one of the grimmest periods. You guys know that I go there a lot.
Yes,
this was my 10th trip there, and I was sleeping in the basement every night in one of the nice hotels, waking up to the smell of tires because you're so far down in the ground. You're in a parking garage sleeping, and I couldn't get to the train station because there were missile strikes. And the mood was so grim, and Ukraine barely made it through the winter. It is hard to describe. Day and night, black and white, it doesn't even do justice to the feeling. But Ukrainians, on that trip, I got to go to Firepoint, and Firepoint is the Ukrainian company that's making the long-range rockets. And they're getting better and better at hitting refineries. So Ukraine has managed to hit all of Russia's major refineries except for one. So Ukraine, its technology is improving, and its drones, its long-range drones are improving as well.
Well, so when we consider that improvement in technology, in morale, is there a sense that Ukraine could end up on the winning side of this conflict, or does it still ultimately need to be a negotiated outcome that's pursued?
So wars always end in negotiations, but right now there is a strategy in place on the Ukrainian side to push as hard as possible with these long-range strikes, and the idea is to compel Vladimir Putin to actually come to the negotiating table. And I think it's working. We see the Russian economy is in trouble, and we see increasing pressure, and we see the Ukrainian side getting closer and closer to Moscow and St. Petersburg, and we see elite splits as well. So is it going to change overnight? No. But the Ukrainians also did something really wise. They've been interrupting supply lines around Crimea and putting huge pressure on logistics, and that's how you win wars.
Interesting. We've talked for years about this now, which is pretty remarkable to think about. In many of our conversations, you've led us to the realization that it's manpower just as much as it is material. We can give all the bombs, tanks, and weapons we can make, but Ukraine needs to have people to wear uniforms and go shoot those weapons. This was becoming harder with time. Where is the recruitment effort now?
So that discussion has actually changed. You and I had this discussion about, oh my God, there's not enough Ukrainian troops to hold the front line. So because Ukraine has invested so much in its drone technology, the kill ratio has really changed. So now one Ukrainian is killed for every 5 Russian. So this is actually, the Russians don't have enough soldiers now. The math has really, really changed. The Russian side is losing 35,000 troops a month. That's an enormous number, and they're not able to replenish their side. And they're pulling in
even through conscripts, even through jails.
Well, so Putin has a political problem. He doesn't want to have a draft. So he's trying to avoid that, and he's been pulling people out of jail. He uses drug addicts. You know, the people that he's putting on the front line are not a great fighting force. These are not West Point graduates, right, Joe?
Yes, it sounds like it.
Well, and as we consider the pressure that the personnel challenges will put on the Kremlin, there's also the question of additional financial pressure. Bloomberg had reported previously about the notion that even the Russian finance ministry was talking about the costs of this war being untenable. And then there's the question of tougher sanctions as well. There was reporting in the Wall Street Journal today, Melinda, that on the sidelines of the NATO summit, a group of lawmakers are going to be meeting with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, to talk about a bill that would intensify Russian sanctions. What would that do ultimately, do you think, if it were to come to fruition?
So I'm really skeptical. This administration does not like sanctions on Russia, and we've seen them back away on sanctions on Russia. So I think it's fabulous. They should absolutely do it. The EU has put, I think, 24 or 25 packages in place, and with sanctions, you have to keep fine-tuning them because the Russians are masters at sanctions evasion.
We should note that French President Emmanuel Macron is just arriving at the NATO dinner and posing for photographs with President Erdogan, and we're told that President Trump's motorcade should be arriving imminently here. If you're with us on YouTube or Bloomberg TV, there's a live view as the dignitaries get together to break bread. And of course, Ukraine will be part of that conversation. So too will Russia. And I'm wondering your thoughts on Vladimir Putin's place in the universe right now. What is his level of security? What is his approval rating in Russia, if you could take such a poll?
So if you could take such a poll is the clause that we need to emphasize. So his numbers are terrible. And there are splits between the presidential administration and the security services. And there's a growing number of people that want him to back away. And then there's a growing number of people that want to increase pressure. But Vladimir Putin is paranoid. He takes high security risks. A bunch of papers have reported all of the different ways that he's trying to stay out of the public. He's not giving a lot of public speeches anymore because he's afraid of the security
Should
risk.
he be?
Yes, of course he should be afraid of this. The Ukrainians are really clever at these things, and we've seen the Ukrainians pull off, all kinds of. If I were Vladimir Putin, I would be afraid of the Ukrainian security services too. But
about that?
Joe, it was even people around Putin who work in his entourage can't take an Uber or they can't take the Moscow metro. That's how paranoid he is, and I think he took their phones away from them too.
Wow.
Well, and of course, that's just as he considers the threat posed by Ukraine. Of course, he, in part, went into Ukraine in the first place over 4 years ago because he was concerned that Ukraine might one day become a member of NATO. Now, as we see the NATO alliance gathering in Ankara with a pursuit of 5% of spending of GDP on defense, has this all ultimately backfired with his aims here? Is it a stronger NATO that has emerged out of these last many years?
Absolutely. We have 2 new NATO members, and Ukraine has become Sparta. It's a small, militarized state, and forget Russia, China, and great power politics. That's the wrong way of looking at the world now. It's about Israel, Rwanda, and Ukraine. These are countries that are militarized, and they have high-tech sectors, and they're going to be innovating. And this is going to be, the new Spartas is actually the watchword for the next period to come.